I'm really excited to be here and talking to you today about judging. Judging is one of the most frequently asked questions of us here at the MLH team after sponsorship, and so I'm really excited to do a deep dive into what makes judging tick and how you can run it well. Um, just to give you an outline of my talk, I'm going to run through some objectives and constraints of what your judging process should look like. Then I'm going to compare different judging styles. I'll talk a little bit about how you should brief your judges, and we can go straight into the logistics of actually running judging. And we can talk a little bit about some of the issues that might come up and how to deal with them. And lastly, we'll follow through with a Q&A. I know there are a lot of questions that have been popping up on Facebook, and so I'm really excited to get a chance to answer them. But before I get started, I should probably introduce myself. I'm Shai. I'm the Deputy Commissioner of Major League Hacking. I get to work with Tim on making sure that you as student organizers are successful. I spend all day on phone calls talking about all sorts of topics, whether they be judging, sponsorship, logistics, marketing, or whatever. And so I'm always really passionate to share what I know and what the MLH team knows with the rest of the community. So let's get started. Let's talk about judging. And before I go any further, I think it's really important to just stress, and I stress this a lot, that MLH is here to help. Major League Hacking, we are here to support and enable you. Specifically with judging, we have a ton of experience with running judging. I think Swift, all the way back when Expo Style was run for the first time, Swift was there, and all of us on our team have spent countless weekends running and coordinating judging. So don't feel like you're in it alone. When it's your event and people are on stage or people are demoing, know that we have your back. And if things come up, we are there to help you, and we want you to rely on us. Feel free to give us any hard problems, and we can help you fix them. Really, you should just think of us as an extension of your organizing team. So, the objectives of judging. What's our goal? So it's really important to note why we do judging. It's really important to make sure that all of our participants feel like they had a fair shot at that grand prize, that at the end of the day, everyone feels like the best hacks won, and that your audience, because they're going to be sitting through your presentations, that they had a good show and they enjoyed watching what got on stage. Your role as the person coordinating things is to make sure that everything works. Judges are human beings, and you need to direct them. Hackers are human beings too, and they might go to the wrong tables, they might set up in the wrong place, all sorts of crazy things could happen, and it's your job to deal with those logistical issues and make sure that everything goes really well. But at a deeper level, I think what hackathon judging is really about isn't picking the best prize and the best hack, but celebrating everyone and making sure everyone feels rewarded and feels seen. They've done something really hard that weekend by building whatever device it is, something that's challenging, something that's resulted in them getting less sleep than they should. And it's really important that the judging process means that you're spending time to make them feel awesome. Because at the end of the day, that's what the expo is about. That's what the presentation is about, is making sure that everyone feels rewarded for accomplishing something. So we've got a couple constraints that we have to deal with anytime we go into judging. The first thing we have to accept is that judges are arbitrary. One judge's favorite hack is definitely not another judge's favorite hack. One judge might not have ever seen a VR project before, and so that could be why they're picking that as their first place. The other thing to keep in mind is judges are subjective, and they're also people. They're human beings. They're not, even if you get the coolest judge in the world, that he or she is still a human being, and they're still liable to make mistakes and to make bad decisions. And then judging time is also finite. You have to accept that it's not always possible that a judge can see everything. If you have 100 projects, you've got to accept that one judge isn't going to see all of 100 of them. And with that in mind, it's really important to remember and to keep at the back of your head, a judge cannot evaluate a project that they haven't seen. And this is, I think, a common pitfall that we see a lot of hackathon organizers fall into, is allowing judges to have their opinions weigh against others. I specifically bring this up in reference to rubrics, and I can talk more later about why rubrics don't work. But at the end of the day, if I am a judge that is kind of harsh and I'm giving someone points on a project, my 7 might be someone else's 10, and that'll push that hack that scored lower to the bottom, and that could be unfair. And because we're evaluating those opinions together, we're coming up with a poor result. And so it's really important to keep anything a judge looks at siloed. And then the last thing to keep in mind is that your judges can't judge 2 prizes at once. And so the big common pitfall here to keep in mind is sponsors and general judges. You can't ask a sponsor to judge their sponsor prize and then also help you judge your general prize. They're going to always, every time, pick their sponsor prize because that's why they're at your event. If someone's doing the API prize for the best use of a loon, that's what they're going to focus on, and you can't expect them to help you. So keep that in mind when you're sourcing your judges. So let's talk about some of the styles of judging. And at a high level, what this comes down to is presentation style versus expo style. And when I say presentation style, what I mean is the style when everyone demos on stage. Typically, this is done as the primary means of judging when we have less than 300 hackers. So usually that's anywhere between 20 to 30 projects, somewhere under that. Anything over 30 projects, and you're looking at very long presentations, and that isn't fun to sit through for a hacker, especially if they're really tired and they want to go home. So keep that in mind when you're making that decision. It's also really simple to do. All you have to coordinate is getting everyone up on stage, getting them plugged into the AV system, giving them a microphone, and letting them talk for 3 minutes. That's really easy to do. You can coordinate that with very little effort. You can get an export of all your submissions from DevPost incredibly easily. And you can provide the order in a really simple way. You also don't need that many judges. You can do it with anywhere between 3 to 5. Presentation style, I think if you're a small hackathon, is a no-brainer, and you should absolutely do that. So back in the day, when I was a student hacker, almost every hackathon did presentation style, where every project went up on stage. And eventually, as hackathons kept growing, we got to a point where we were looking at 3-4 hour demos, and that just didn't work anymore. And as a result of that, we see expo style. Expo style is probably the most common thing that you'll see. And usually expo style results in you doing a presentation style judging anyway. And expo style will be the first 3/4 of that process. The important thing to note with expo style is this is the type of judging where everyone is demoing simultaneously. You usually see this when you get over 300 hackers, and this tends to be extremely complicated. And now, instead of just worrying about one person on stage, you have to worry about everyone. So you have to keep in mind things like power, things like Wi-Fi. Where is everyone going to stand? How are we going to make it so judges can find the projects? How are we going to coordinate all of these people so that sponsors can see all of the projects that have submitted? If you're in a presentation, sponsors just see everyone, and they can know automatically who's used their API or their project. And so it makes it very simple to coordinate, or very difficult to coordinate. And the other thing to keep in mind is the number of judges varies. And there's a formula that we have internally for calculating that, and I'm going to share that with you later. But safe to say you need substantially more judges than presentation style. You go from 3 to 5 to anywhere in the realm of 20. So why do we judge small and large events differently? And why is the process different? The first thing to keep in mind is, like I said, rubrics don't work at all. Whenever I see a rubric, the first thing I want to do is I want to throw it away. Again, the thing I mentioned earlier with judges being different in their scales is very true. You're also seeing things where, if a judge has never been to a hackathon before, they might not reasonably able to guess, how long or how complicated is this. If a project is in an area that they're not an expert in, they might not necessarily be qualified to give you a 0 out of 100 in the structure of the code. They're also not going to dive in and take a look. And so your scales tend to be very different. But something that is easy for everyone to judge is the value proposition of your event, right? So if you're an event that is very design focused, you can ask your judges to keep that in mind when they're judging, and come back and give you kind of, the projects that they thought most exemplified that spirit. Whereas with a rubric, things are kind of arbitrary, you're not calibrated properly, and there's a whole host of kind of extra issues that show up. And so just the TLDR is just avoid rubrics. They don't work, and they're a waste of paper. You could save the paper. And then the other thing to keep in mind is that judges, judging time is finite. Judges are not going to be able to see every project. You're just going to have to accept that in expo style. You with presentation where you have everyone on stage, it doesn't really, it's you're at that point where you can still judge within that window. At some point, there's an expectation that a judge needs to go home and see their family, and so you can't keep them forever. So it's time to talk to our judges. We're in the briefing room before judging has started. There are a couple things that you should cover. And I think the most important there is just, again, talking about how they should evaluate their projects. I like to lead with a specific line, and I use this every time I'm in a judging briefing, and that's there's one question that is the wrong question to ask, and that's how do you make money, or what's your business model? Making it clear up front that this isn't a startup weekend is really important. As a hacker, the worst feeling in the world to have is that you've been working on some crazy project that's causing you to push your limits, and someone comes up and asks you, that's great and all, but how does it make money? That is a terrible feeling, and we should make sure that no one ever has to feel that way. And it's really easy to do by just being upfront with it. You also want to remind your judges that the time is really important. If you tell them that they need to look at a certain number of hacks in a certain time frame, you should stress that to them. And odds are they're probably not going to be back in time anyway, because they're not going to know how important or how on time you are. So it's very important to stress this to them. And also another thing you can do to make your life easier is push volunteers out, maybe 10, 20 minutes before an expo round finishes, to get them to come back to you. And then also you should inform your sponsors of how to find the hackers that they're judging. And again, don't count on them to help you pick whatever you're trying to pick, whether it be a top 10 or a top 5, until they've finished. And they get to pick first because they'll be done before you will, with your top 10 or your top 5. So let's jump into the logistics really quickly. So presentation style is the easy one to judge. And the thing to also keep in mind is that presentation style, a lot of hackathons will end up doing both. And so this is useful information for everyone. The first thing that you need to do is that you need to make sure to tell everyone what the order is. You need to establish an order and send it to your participants. And whether that be alphabetical or the order of submission doesn't really matter, just as long as it's consistent and it's publicly available. So make sure to share that with everyone. You need to then actually run through the presentation. So watch all the demos, let everyone go up on stage, have everyone present. Afterwards, you're going to take the judges out of the room and you're going to take them to somewhere private. We're a big fan of loading docks for private discussions, but sometimes your presentation areas will have backstages. If you're in a classroom, you can just go to a different classroom and close the door. I like to personally open the discussion by running through some of our favorite projects. If it's a small top 10, I'll just run through every one of them to kind of get a reminder of who's on stage. As the person doing the convening, you shouldn't be joining the discussion as a judge. You should be there as a neutral third party to provide kind of assistance and help remind judges of what's going on. But you shouldn't necessarily exert an opinion in this process. I then, after running through everything, like to take nominations for packs that should go through, and that kind of helps narrow the funnel down a little bit, especially if you're going from 30 hacks to 5. And it really helps kind of source and kind of restrict the hacks that you're looking at. So after we've done that restriction and gotten them up on the board, or provided like a place for them to talk or kind of visualize the specific hacks that we're talking about, we're going to vote for the top 3. So I'm going to go around the room and I'm going to ask a judge, what is your first place hack, what's your second place hack, and what's your third place hack? I'm going to give the first place hack a third place, the second place hack, the first place hack, I'm going to give 3 points. The second place hack, I'm going to give 2 points. And the third place hack, I'm going to give 1 point. And then I'm going to use this to kind of filter down and find outliers. So during this process, you might have a couple hacks that, all get, let's say, 5 points each. And you know that those are kind of your top hacks, and you can filter the list down to those ones and then re-vote on those hacks until you get down to a top 3 with those points. So I've got an example that I want to run through. I'm going to run through an example of picking my top 3 ice cream flavors. So I'm going to exit this PowerPoint. And here we go. So here's a hypothetical list of ice cream flavors that have all presented, and we have 5 judges. So I'm going to go around the room and I'm going to ask Judge 1, what's your favorite ice cream? They're going to tell me it's mango is their first place, so I'm going to give them 3 points. Mint chocolate chip is their second place, and then vanilla is their third place. I'm going to ask Judge 2. They're going to tell me pistachio, mint chocolate chip, and vanilla. And then I'm going to do the same thing for Judge 3. Judge 3 really likes chocolate. They like rum raisin as their second place, and then pistachio is their third place. Judge 4 likes chocolate, likes mint and vanilla. And then Judge 5 likes green tea ice cream, pistachio, and vanilla. And so we can take a look and we can see that we already have some outliers here. We have 3 ice creams that are all at 6 points. So since we're looking for a top 3 in this example, I'm going to go ahead and just move these up and narrow my filter down to here, and then I'm going to re-vote. And I'm going to ask the judges to re-vote on their top 3 based exclusively out of that range. So in this instance, let's say Judge 1 changes their first place to mint chocolate chip, their second place to chocolate, and their third place to pistachio. We have Judge 2 do that. And again, as they're re-voting, it's helping to filter things down. So I'm going to do that. And in this instance, we've gone ahead and we've got a winner. So in this instance, chocolate has 11 points, which puts them at first place. Pistachio has 10 points, which puts them at second place. And then mint chocolate chip has 9 points, which puts them at third place. And that would be our winner, our first place, our second place, and our third place. And we've gone ahead and we've taken a huge set, we've filtered it down to a smaller set, and we've re-voted again to come to our optimal top 3 in order. So let me pull back my slideshow. So expo style is similar, but also very different. And so the first thing I think we need to establish with expo style is figuring out how many judges do we need. On average, you can expect each judge to see 1 team every 5 minutes. And this is even with telling them to do less, you should also account for a little bit of a buffer time for them to kind of wrap things up and to move on to the next project. You also have to keep in mind that they're going to be clicking on things, and that could result in them losing sense of time. But on average, you can expect them to take about 5 minutes. You also want to make sure that each team is seen at least twice. This way, you can rule out any kind of bias, in a subject area. Typically, when I'm doing table assignments, I try and get people that work together to not spend time with each other. If they're standing next to each other and they seem like they're close knit, I usually try and spread them into different areas of the expo just to make sure that we don't come back and I only have one opinion. If you get one opinion out of 2 judges, that's not particularly helpful because, when they're colluding, one of them might overpower the other one. So definitely try and split people up and ensure that the two judges don't work together. And a good way to also ensure this is asking them to kind of start staggered. So have one start at number 1 and the other start at like project number 5, and at 10 they'll rotate back. So the main formula there is that you have the number of teams times 2 for the times that they need to be seen, times 5 for the number of minutes, divided by the number of judges that you have, results in 1 round of expo. Or if we do some basic algebra, we get number of teams times 10 divided by a round of expo, which equals the number of judges you need. So I have an example here where we have 98 teams. Let's say it's a 98 team hackathon. Times 10 gives us about 980, divided by 45 minutes results in 22 judges. So for you to be able to judge 98 teams in 45 minutes or do 1 round of expo, you'll need 22 judges. I know that's a kind of a difficult number to find, especially for expo, and I think some of the best judges that you can get are actually student organizers and other student hackers. These are people that understand what makes a good hackathon project better than anyone else. And so definitely feel free to reach out to your peers if you're trying to find those numbers. Next, you're going to assign table numbers. DevPost has a really cool tool that helps export, DevPost submissions to table numbers and get people out. And you can also give it to your API sponsors to kind of help filter. But you're going to give a judge a block of tables. So you're going to say judge 1 and judge 2. You're going to go look at tables 1 through 10. Judge 3, judge 4. You're going to look at 11 through 10, and so on and so forth. They're going to do the exact same thing that you did in the presentation style. They're going to come back and they're going to give you their top 3, and you're going to use that to establish an outlier. So once you've gotten that top 3, you should do the same thing with the points. You want to give first place 3 points, second place 2 points, and third place 1 point. And you'll be able to find an outlier in that set, and you can take that outlier onto the next round. So you're going to repeat it until you're finished. So I'm going to pull up an example that we can run through really quickly. So let me pull it up here. So here we have expo style judging, and luckily for us, all of our other judges have been really timely, and so they've given us data already, and so we've been able to establish some outliers in all of the other blocks. So looky here, Judge 2 and Judge 3 from block 1 are coming back. Judge 2's favorite hack was number 3, their second favorite hack was number 5, and their last favorite hack was number 1. Judge 3, their favorite hack was number 3 or number 1, so I'm going to give them 3 points. Their second favorite hack was number 5, so I'm going to give them 2 points, and their least favorite hack was or their third place hack was number 10. And we can take a look here and we can see that we've established some outliers again. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight number 1. Number 1 is ahead by 3 points. All 3 judges thought that it was a hack that justified taking it to the third round or to the next round of judging. And with all of the hacks that are outliers in this set, we have about 19 hacks. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull them to the next round, and we're going to reestablish rankings. So I'm going to pull hack number 1 because that was the outlier to the next round. And lucky us, Judge 1, Judge 2, and Judge 3 have already gotten back to us or on the second block. So we can see here that we have a top 5 established in the second block. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we've shrunk that 50 to 98 block into a top 5. We're going to do the same thing here with Judge 1, Judge 2, and Judge 3 in hacks 1 through 50. So Judge 2 came back and they said their favorite hack was number 41 or number 41. Their second favorite hack was 21, and their third favorite hack was number 1. Judge 3 is going to say their favorite hack was 3. Their second favorite hack was, or their favorite hack was number 1 with 3 points. Their second favorite hack is number 2. Is getting 2 points and is number 43. And their third favorite hack is number 21. So that'll get 1 point. And we can do the same calculations here. So I'm just going to copy paste my sum function. And we can see that we have some outliers again. We have this project And it looks like we have another top 5, so we've safely established a top 10 that we can take on to expo, and that's how you can kind of filter down from 98 projects to a top 10 in about 90 minutes. In about 90 minutes of judging. So these 10 hacks would then go on to present on stage, and we would go back to presentation style to figure out the top 10 of these hacks, or the top 3 of these 10 hacks, after they've all demoed on stage. So things can go really, really wrong with this. Your judges might not show up on time. They might give you bad hacks. The hacks themselves might disappear. They might, all sorts of things can go wrong. So what do you do when shit hits the fan? So I'm going to pull it back to earlier, and I'm going to say again, this is why we're here to help you at events. This is something we have a lot of practice with solving, and so if things are going wrong, always feel free to ask help from a Major League Hacking staff person. All of us have countless practice when it comes to running hackathons, and countless, have done it countless times ourselves. But if we're not there, you should just use your best judgment, and it's okay to delay the start of closing ceremonies to finish judging. I will be brutally honest with you and say that it is a very small number of hackathons that actually start their closing ceremonies on time. So it's okay to start late if that's your solution to not hearing back or not having enough data. It's also okay to throw more student organizers at it. If you need someone to just make a judgment call and kind of shrink things down. But again, that's why we're at hackathons. We're here to help you. So feel free, if anything is going wrong, to ask us questions anytime. And with that, I'm going to open the floor up to general questions. Swift, do you have anything for me?
Hey, Shai, thanks so much for that presentation. We really appreciate it. I do have a number of questions for you from the audience. If anybody has any additional questions, you can go ahead and either post those in the Facebook group, or preferably actually the Google Hangout Q&A app, and I will be more than happy to ask them to Shai in that. Our first question here comes from Michelle Chen. She asks, can you use sponsor reps as judges?
So my answer to that is it depends. If a sponsor rep is judging a prize, absolutely not. If they aren't, definitely. As long as they're not giving out a prize or involved with the judging of a prize, you can definitely use them. And it tends to help if you ask them beforehand, just to give them a heads up as well. But also feel free to ask them, there during the event if you're running out of people, and make sure just to let them know as well the night before, because they might not come back in time to make it to your judging briefing.
I'll ask a follow-up question there. What if a sponsor comes up to you and says they can handle judging both their sponsor hacks and also some of the top 10 projects or some of the top projects?
You should thank them for offering, and tell them you'd love to hear who their winner is first, and once they've finished it, to come back and to let you know. But you shouldn't let them do that unless you shouldn't let them help you with that top 10 until they're finished with their project, and you should push back, but push back gently.
Awesome. Our next question here comes from Julian. Julian asks, should we allow judges from our school/faculty? Is there a risk of conflict of interest where they prefer certain students? And I'll also expand this question to sponsors as well. If sponsors are helping you, is there any conflict of interest with them picking projects that potentially use their technologies or API?
I don't think so. I think most judges, actually I would say all judges, I think have especially if they're from academia, have a high standard of ethics, and would be able to prevent themselves from doing that. I've never seen that be a problem. If you do have a certain faculty member or sponsor that you're concerned about, I just wouldn't invite them to be a judge at all. You get to choose who your judges are at the end of the day, but I don't think that's a problem, and I don't think it's a conflict of interest, and I think people tend to be able to hold themselves to a high enough standard to make it not a conflict of interest. I will also add that one of my strategies when it comes to hackathons that have, difficulties with working with their administration is to recommend that they invite whoever is giving them difficulties to come be a judge, and use judging as like a political play to like get people at your event and to feel valuable, and then get them invested because they're a big part of your event. So I definitely think inviting school and faculty members is a great idea, and I don't think it poses any problem.
Awesome. Our next question comes from our friend Richard Murby over at DevPost. He asks, how many projects can you, on average, expect a judge to look at during an expo? And then the other question I'll ask is, how many projects can you expect, say, to have during your expo if you're maybe at the beginning of your event, or if you're planning ahead to figure out how many table numbers you need to print or how many judges to have?
Yeah, so I think again, it comes down to time, not necessarily bandwidth. I think you take your expo and you divide it by 5. You take the number of minutes in your expo, you divide it by 5, and then you minus maybe 5 or 10 for the number of rounds, and that's how many people that you can expect them to take a look at. It's important that you also do the subtraction for the number of rounds, because that's when you're going to be rebriefing a judge and telling them what tables to look at. So there's no, I think, standard formula for this. I think it really depends on how long your expo is. And what was the other question, Swift? Number of projects?
Yeah, the number of projects to expect.
So we usually anticipate that about 30% of the people that show up at your hackathon will make it to final demos. Sometimes it's a little higher, sometimes it's a little lower, but at about, you can expect about 30%. Usually I say it's about maybe 10 projects per 100 people. So at a 100-person hackathon, you can expect 10 projects. 200-person hackathon, you can expect 20 projects. But sometimes it does scale up, and sometimes it does scale down. It depends on the ability of an individual body of students.
Awesome. Our next question comes from Gene. Gene asks, should we alert judges about projects that are commonly seen at every hackathon? I'm sure that you're well aware of some of the trends that we see in projects. Do you think it's an issue?
I don't necessarily think so. The thing to keep in mind is that judges should be evaluating based on like the value proposition of your hack, and I think most hackathons exist to facilitate learning and to facilitate technical self-empowerment. And so if the result of technical self-empowerment is taking a project that they've seen and starting it again from scratch, I don't think that they should be penalized for copying a common project. And odds are they might not have even seen it. For a while, we saw, I think, consistently saw sign language leap motion hacks, and I don't think that they should be penalized for it being a popular project, because it is a very difficult project to do, and it's a very exciting project to do. So no, I don't think you need to warn them about that kind of thing. That said, feel free to do a sanity check on your top 10. Just run out, take a look at each of the top 10 before they've been made, and if you feel like a specific implementation of it isn't doing a great job, you can always remove them from the set. Or if you're making a decision between 2 projects to push through, you can use that to kind of like make your judgment. But I don't think judges need to be informed in that. And I think the other important thing is that judges don't need to understand how you're evaluating things or where the point systems come in. You should just task them to find the top 3, and that's literally it. You should keep the spreadsheets to yourself. You don't need to kind of overcomplicate things in front of their eyes. You should just let them go out, find their favorite projects, and come back and tell you.
Awesome. This one comes from Praneeth. Praneeth asks, is there an opportunity to turn any elements of judging into a software solution?
I think we've tried that as a community, and I don't think it's worked well. I don't think software is the appropriate solution to this problem. I think you can do things like, make table numbers easier. But when it comes to like stuff like this, I think it's very iffy. With software, you have a failure point that like it might be non-recoverable. Whereas with pen and paper or spreadsheets, you can recover that if something goes wrong. I think hosting, apps, especially if they haven't been tested, is a bad idea. And I don't think that they're flexible enough to kind of deal with every possible, type of situation and number of judges. That said, I do think there are some interesting solutions that are being tried out in the community. I unfortunately have not had a chance to try them. I'm specifically thinking of pairwise that we've heard of happening at a few events. I haven't been at an event that's used it, so I can't specifically comment on it, but I don't think adding like technical complexity to judging is a solution. If it was, I think we would have seen it, roll out at this point, because we've definitely been to events where things have been tried to be on technical software and they've never really gone particularly well.
Awesome. Well, we had a couple other questions come in that didn't come in before, but I will ask them. One of the questions came in from Anthony. He asks, what are our thoughts on pairwise model for judging from HackMIT? It sounds like you don't have any direct experience with it, Shai, but maybe we could have somebody from our team who does answer the question and follow up with it on the Facebook group.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And then another question that came to my head while you were answering one of the other ones, cheating at hackathons. Obviously, as deputy commissioner, you probably see a fair deal of cheating allegations, things like, and especially around plagiarism. Can you talk a little bit about cheating at hackathons and maybe like how to deal with it and some common things that you're seeing?
Yeah, so I think cheating at hackathons is extremely overhyped. I think there's a sense that cheating is much more pervasive than it might actually be. We've definitely received cheating allegations. The one thing I think to keep in mind is that starting a hack before the hackathon is definitely cheating, but at the end of the day, we don't have like a formal list of rules that you have to abide by when you're a hackathon organizer. That's just like, we don't say the type of student that you have to restrict down to. That's a decision that's up to you as an individual organizer. What your rules are also up to you as an individual organizer. That said, if you do hear reports of cheating, definitely loop us in. We're happy to do an investigation. We have done multiple formal investigations on cheating. We'll do things like looking at the source code. We'll look at the GitHub history to see when commits are made. We'll talk to the organizers to learn a little bit about the projects. I don't think using online tutorials is a problem. I don't think using commonly found libraries is a problem. At the end of the day, the most important thing is that a hacker is learning and is growing themselves from a technical perspective. And so I think it's actually very difficult to cheat when it comes to being at hackathons.
Awesome. Well, if anybody has any other questions that they didn't have a chance to get answered, feel free to send those in on the Facebook group. We'll definitely answer them after the hangout is over. Specifically, we'll look into that pairwise judging question and see if any of the MLH team has any experience dealing with it. One last plug before we go. If you enjoyed office hours, I definitely think you'll enjoy HackCon. It is our annual conference for hackathon organizers. We have lots of awesome talks from experts in the community, talk about things like judging, sponsorship, how to actually organize your event, logistics, literally anything you could possibly think of. It's a great meeting point to get to meet other hackathon organizers and hackathon enthusiasts from the community. It's a lot of fun with discussions around how to organize events and the future of our community. So I highly, highly encourage you to join us in June, the 24th to the 26th in Estes Park, Colorado. You can purchase tickets at hackcon.io, and there are scholarships available if you are interested in attending but unable to afford the ticket price, so definitely apply for those as well. With that, I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in, and also thank Shai for putting on this amazing office hours. We really appreciate you giving us some insight into judging, and keep an eye on the MLH Facebook page for the next office hours, and we will see everybody next time. Thank you so much, everyone.